evening and welcome to a shortened edition of TBT NewsHour. Lakehead Public Schools has confirmed that a student at Grand Morgan has tested positive for COVID-19. It's the first positive case associated with a Thunder Bay school. The news comes as already about 1,000 school-aged children across the city are waiting to be tested. Ryan Benazzo has details.
Lakehead Public Schools has confirmed the first known case of COVID-19 at a local school, a primary student at École Grand Morgan.
The child was not at school today, had not been for a number of days, but we isolated that classroom and called parents to pick up those children as directed by the health unit.
The student was in a class of less than 20 children, and while those students have all now been sent home for 14 days, the rest of the school will be open tomorrow on the advice of the Thunder Bay District Health Unit.
That class had no contact with any other class. Their cohort played outside at recess together. There was a minimal number of teachers that supervised those students, and there were proper hand washing and masking protocols for staff.
The health unit did announce the district's 106th case of COVID-19 on Wednesday afternoon, but gave no indication as to whether that is in fact the case here at Grand Morgan, saying only that the person is self-isolating. The news comes amidst an already soaring demand for testing in school-aged children. Shane Muir is the COVID-19 Task Force Commander for Superior North EMS, which is handling all in-home testing for kids under the age of 13.
We've gone from capacity of 20 upwards of 250 tests that we're doing a day. So our significant increase in capacity, and the vast majority of that has been symptomatic pediatrics.
Many of those are for school children who've been sent home with symptoms, which in some cases are as mild as the sniffles. There are currently about 1,000 local kids waiting to be tested. It's unclear how high the wait list will soar now that there's a positive case, but the Norwest Community Health Centre has also begun providing testing to its clients to help ease the backlog.
We are fielding a high influx of calls.
Karen McKissick is the safety officer for the Catholic School Board. She says student absences are up about 50% over last year. There are currently about 500 Catholic students away from the classroom.
There are the offshoot ones that are not related, but I would have to say the majority of those absences would be relating to COVID.
Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
Meanwhile, Ontario has partnered with 60 pharmacies across the province who will soon offer free COVID-19 testing to asymptomatic people. While none of those pharmacies are in this region, it's hoped the service will be offered in the second wave of openings. The expanded service is expected to reduce the long lines we're seeing at testing centers across the province. This is a look at Kitchener, where people began lining up around 2:30 this morning, 5 hours ahead of opening time. That center had to be closed due to safety concerns. Premier Doug Ford expressed his frustration with Health Canada over this today. He says if they had rolled out new forms of testing, such as saliva tests, with a sense of urgency, we wouldn't be in this current mess.
Talk about frustration. At least we're up here dealing with it every single day and giving results and showing what we're doing to improve testing. But it's like fighting with one hand tied behind your back. It's frustrating, to say the least. So Health Canada, for the 50th time, give me an answer. And then we can move from, if you're telling me it's not going to be tested, approved for the next 2 months, at least we have a plan to move forward. But that was part of our plan. Never in a million years would I think it would take months to get a saliva test. It's amazing how other areas around the world can get this done, but Health Canada just can't get it done.
The Premier called saliva tests a game changer, saying it will cut wait times for results from days down to minutes for asymptomatic people, hopefully taking the pressure off those long lines that we're seeing. And in Ottawa today, the Liberal government laid out its agenda for the rest of its mandate. The speech from the throne focused on the pandemic and was loaded with promises. They indicate the Trudeau government intends to keep spending big on COVID relief to get Canadians through this crisis. Glenn McGregor has more.
The traditional ceremony of the throne speech still observed, but in new, limited ways. Mask required, and only a handful of MPs from each party gathered in a physically distanced Senate chamber. The speech's focus made clear in the first lines delivered by the Governor-General.
To overcome a pandemic requires the work and resolve of every order of government, of every community, and of every one of us.
It sets as a top priority for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government, fighting the pandemic directly with measures to improve and expand testing.
The federal government will be there to help the provinces increase their testing capacity. Canadians should not be waiting in line for hours to get a test.
The big ticket pledge to help Canadians keep working by extending the wage subsidy program until next summer.
The government will work with businesses and labor to ensure the program meets the needs of the health and economic situation as it evolves.
And as the CERB benefit expires this month, there is notably no mention of a universal basic income. Instead, a promise of a comprehensive overhaul of the employment insurance system for those out of work, and a new Canada Recovery benefit for those who don't qualify. To help working parents, the government promises to finally deliver on a national childcare plan.
The government will make a significant, long-term, sustained investment to create a Canada-wide early learning and childcare system.
There are references, too, to rebuilding after the pandemic, with an emphasis on the green economy, clean tech, and further encouraging the development of electric vehicles. Reconciliation with Indigenous peoples remain a priority, as does systemic racism, with promises of criminal justice reform and oversight of police. It makes commitments on food security, affordable housing, a revamp of the federal benefit for Canadians living with disabilities. The heavy financial cost to government of all these promises necessary, the speech says.
This is not the time for austerity. Canada entered this crisis in the best fiscal positions of its peers, and the government is using that fiscal firepower.
The actual details on how all this will be implemented and its costs to come in a financial update the government promises later this fall.
This is an ambitious plan for an unprecedented reality. The course of events will determine what needs to be done when.
After a throne speech delivered in unusual circumstances today, another unprecedented step tonight. The Prime Minister is scheduled to directly address Canadians on national television and give an update on the pandemic. Glenn McGregor, CTV News, Ottawa.
And Thunder Bay Rainy River MP Marcus Pulowski spoke with TBT News shortly after today's throne speech and offered some key points that residents in northwestern Ontario should focus on.
For us, I think the promise for more money for the sectors hardest hit, and specifically the tourism industry, is important. I think the promise for national standards in chronic care homes is important. More money and resources to keep people in their homes longer, that's important.
A local grassroots anti-racism group says it will gather like-minded residents at every changing of the season to honor those who have died unnecessarily in our city. More than 50 people gathered at Patterson Park yesterday evening on the first day of fall to attend a peaceful rally hosted by the group called Not One More Death. Indigenous elder Mani Shakabe says too many people have fallen victim to racism in Thunder Bay. She's calling on city leadership, police, and residents to come together to end discrimination.
Thunder Bay should be a safe place, a place where you can be free and walk around and not get beat up when you go out, or away from racism. Try not to put anybody down because you don't like the way they look.
The rally took place across the street from the Thunder Bay Courthouse, where just days earlier it was decided that the man accused of killing Barbara Kentner will be tried for manslaughter rather than second-degree murder in the infamous trailer hitch incident. After 189 days of closure, the Canada Games complex reopened its doors to the public today. Users of the pool and other areas will notice COVID-19 protocols in place, along with some alterations to the facility. TBT's Kayla Karim has details.
People were lined up at 5:45 Wednesday morning to finally come back inside the Canada Games complex after a long 6 months away. Guests are greeted by a pre-screening station outside. The major changes include some of the machines in the weight room being blocked off due to social distancing, along with updated room capacities. Pool users will notice saunas, hot tubs, and the slide are all out of operation, and users must book online or call in advance for swim times. Head lifeguard Kyla Strickland says despite the changes, residents are thrilled to be back.
Everybody is super excited. They're just saying how great it is and how awesome it feels to be back in the pool and get some movement, get a little bit of exercise. And they're really pleased with the facility and what they've come and walked into.
Really happy to be back and seeing their friends who they normally meet here. On our social media, there's been a ton of traffic, people wanting to get back to the CGC. They're just happy to be home.
The complex also used the time off to improve the facility. Some minor renovations include new flooring in the main fitness room and general upgrades in the weight room.
I'm really hoping that people see how clean it is. Like, we have really put a huge effort into the cleanliness. The minor upgrades that we've done have, I think, really add to the complex, and you'll see a visible difference.
For those interested in visiting the revamped facility, bookings can be made on the Canada Games Complex website or over the phone up to 10 days in advance. Kayla Karim, TBT News.
The Fort William Rotary Club is pledging $500,000 towards bringing cardiac surgery to Thunder Bay. The announcement came today outside the Rotary Club's latest lottery home, where proceeds from this year's draw will add to a fund set aside for the regional hospital's Our Hearts at Home campaign. Another sellout of tickets would mean those funds get to the campaign even sooner. The hospital's chief nursing executive, Megan Sharp, says this donation means a lot, considering the complications of their fundraising goals.
We're extremely close to what the goal was approximately a year ago, but the more donations we get, we're not going to stop getting donations because there's a life limit, if you will, on medical equipment, and there's a lifespan, so you have to, warranties and things like that you have to change. So any donation is very beneficial towards this project.
Everybody in Thunder Bay will appreciate being able to have cardiac surgery here at home, instead of having to drive more than a day away and then being down a long way away from home with no family. It'll be great to be here.
The big draw for the House Lottery takes place on October 12th, and around 92% of the tickets have been sold so far. The overall cardiovascular campaign currently sits over $5.5 million. All right, Tyler, sports coming up after the break.
A shortened sports segment for a shortened news hour.
Yes.
Felix Auger-Aliassime was on the court earlier today. We'll preview Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final, and one of the longest standing